Hi, everyone. Thanks so much again for joining us this evening. I am Elena with Napa Bookmine. I am so pleased to be joined tonight by Jamise Harper and Jane Mount, authors of Bibliophile Diverse Spines. This is especially special to us because Jane illustrated our old facade from back in the day in Napa with our cute little orange and the awnings and everything, and it is no longer. So it's nice to have that little illustration in her first book for us to look back on and remember. And we're so excited about this new project. So I'm just going to introduce them and then let them get chatting a little bit. So Jamise Harper is the creator of the hashtag Diverse Spines and the Diverse Spines book community on social media, which highlights literature by Black women and women of color, as well as Spines and Vines, a blog dedicated to book and wine pairings. So obviously perfect for here. She lives in Washington, D.C., the metro area. We are so happy that she set her alarm to be with us late this evening. Thank you. And joining us as well, Jane Mount is an illustrator, designer, and writer. In 2008, she founded Ideal Bookshelf, a company that makes things for bibliophiles. She currently lives and is zooming from, presumably, a log cabin in Hawaii with her husband, weird cats, and a freckled puppy. Thank you both so much for joining us. What a treat this is.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, yeah.
So I would love to hear about how this project got started and when this project got started, because my guess is this has been a long time in the making, or not. Maybe it was super fast. Maybe you're
not so long.
No, not so long. No, not at all.
Well, so the way we met actually was interesting. A few years ago, so at Ideal Bookshelf, I make custom prints and custom items for people with your favorite books. So you tell me your 10 favorite books and I draw the spines of them together. So it's like a portrait of you from the inside. And I make mugs like that too. So in 2018 at Christmas time, I got an order from a young guy, like in his early 20s, and he had commissioned a mug for his mom with all her favorite books, and he'd really researched it, like gone on her blog and on Instagram and figured out all her favorite books, and then made a mug for her. And turns out that was Jamise's son, and so she liked the mug so much on Christmas morning she Instagrammed about it, and that's how we met. Is because then all of a sudden I got a ton of DMs of people asking me, how can I get this mug? I need the same mug. So yeah. So clearly she had excellent taste in books, and that's how we met. And then and you have the mug with you, right? Do you want to?
I do. This time I have it. See, here it is. Can you see?
Awesome.
Yeah.
And
it was such a thoughtful gift. I mean, I knew of Jane from her Bibliophile, the first book, because she came to DC for a signing and I wasn't able to go. And one of my good friends got me a copy and got it signed. And so it just was really special that he took the time to.
Yeah, I mean, amazing.
Mug. Yeah.
I think it's awesome. Yeah. And then, so early in 2020, I was talking to Chronicle, my publisher for Bibliophile, about doing another book similar to Bibliophile, but focused on something like a genre, like sci-fi or mysteries or something like that. And when they asked what I wanted to do, I said, well, I'd really like to focus on helping people diversify their reading list, you know, to the books that they're reading. But I'm not the person to do that. I mean, not by myself. I want to work with someone else. And they were like, oh, do you have anyone in mind? And I was like, I sure do. I know the perfect person. She has a whole Instagram account devoted to diverse spines, and she would be perfect. And they're like, okay, great, go ask her. So I went on Instagram and very, suavely DM'd her like, hey, ever thought about writing a book? Want to write one with me?
Yeah. And so, I mean, I don't know how many people, Jane Mount sends you a DM saying, do you want to write a book? You're looking at it like, clearly she has the wrong person. Like she definitely has the wrong person. There's no way. And so I looked at it for a while and I'm like, this can't be right. So I text her back and I said, are you sure you have the right person? And she's like, yes, I have the right person. And I'm like, okay, tell me more. So that was like in June. And we were supposed to start, I mean, after she told me everything about this, what she had planned, I had a little bit of hesitancy for doing it because I knew it was going to be a lot of work. Jane said it was going to be a lot, but it was a lot. I don't
think she quite believed me how much work it was.
And
because
so,
we had a very short.
Yeah, we were supposed to start in July, but we didn't actually start until September.
We're both procrastinators, it turns out. But yeah, we got started in September and we did all the research and writing basically by the end of the year. And then I drew the pictures in the beginning of this year. So it was a pretty short timeline. And
Like
yeah.
3-4 months we had to get all the writing in. It was
Still recovering. Yeah.
Yes, still recovering from that.
Yeah.
Feel free to ask any questions at any time.
Yeah, anyone.
That is so fast, particularly for an illustrated book. One of my questions, Jane, was how long it takes you to do one of these illustrations. I mean, you must have been powering through them to make them all that fast.
It's a little bit of a blur. I think I was supposed to do them by the end of February, and it took me till at least the end of March. I know I was late, but we work with a really awesome designer at Chronicle named Kristen Hewitt, and she, you know, I would give her placeholder stuff and she could figure it out and make it work until I could get all the different elements in. I think I was still drawing portraits of people up until the very last minute, right before it was supposed to go to press. So
yeah, but talk about how many drawings you did. It's over 200.
Over a couple hundred, yeah, at least a couple hundred different drawings and stuff. And some of them, you know, don't take as much time. Like I love drawing like small little animals I can stick in here and there, but the things like the writing rooms, you know, of authors was one of my favorite parts to do, because I mean, while I love drawing books, I do also like to draw other things, and it's nice to mix it up. And I love to see where people, you know, make the magic happen. So drawing the writing rooms was one of my favorite parts, but it takes for sure a lot longer than drawing the cover of a book, let's say. Yeah.
So imagine we were like never having dreamed or thought about writing a book. That would be me. Never on my bucket list to write a book ever. And to go into the fire doing this, and we literally had 3 or 4 months. It was a whirlwind. I think someone asked the question.
Yeah, what was your favorite part?
You know, my favorite part was working with Jane. I mean, literally,
Awesome.
We're on 2 different time zones. I'm in the East Coast. She's in Hawaii.
And we had never met in person until at our first book event 3 weeks ago. So we did everything in email, Zoom, instant messaging. Like, yeah, we
in the middle of a pandemic. So I think that it was good to have something else to focus on. But I think just generally overall, working with Jane, because I have a full-time job. So I'm working like 8 to 5:30. And by that, my day ends and Jane's day is just kind of like just getting going. Yeah. So then we would, you know, do book stuff till like after midnight. So
your time. Yeah, I don't know how you do it.
So it was a process, but it was also very enjoyable. I will say that. So that was probably my favorite part of the process.
And same here. I mean, having done Bibliophile by myself, this was so much more enjoyable and just so fun. And I mean, we worked together so well. I'm just still amazed because it was, you know, I mean, even though I thought we would get along, there's no telling until you actually start working together. And our working styles actually are perfect together. I mean, Jamise is super organized, way more organized than I am. But it worked really well. And I think we both felt very comfortable telling each other what we thought about different stuff and making decisions together. And yeah, it's awesome. I mean,
you can tell them what Chronicle says about us as
Chronicle's like, wow, you two work together better than any of our other co-authors. So we're very proud of that.
Yeah. Very proud.
Yeah.
But I think it was, you know, not having ever met someone, you just kind of get a feel for their personalities when you're across the screen. And we just didn't talk about the book. We talked about daily things in life, you know, so that was helpful. But I will never forget, she goes, well, I'm going to send you an email with some files. And I'm like, okay. And I knew that she, you know, she's done this before. So I know she had the roadmap, and I'm thinking, okay, perfect. I open up the email and there's like tons of spreadsheets. And I was like, oh my God, she's my person. I mean, like, I know this is going to work because
I was so worried, like, oh my God, please let her be a spreadsheet person too, because otherwise she's going to really hate this. Yeah.
Oh, so the spreadsheets were basically where we would like load up different books based upon the genre. We kind of figured out the genres along the way of the topics, what we were going to do, but she already had the roadmap. So it just kind of helped us, you know, the process of picking the books. Now that was
hard. Yeah. Like, we could easily have made a book twice as thick, you know, full of more stuff. So it was just trying to narrow everything down and make sure we had everything really like a really robust amount of information, but also, you know, picking the things we thought were best. So yeah, it was very difficult to pick books. We could have put so much.
Or her sending me a text message saying, I think there's way too many books in historical fiction, because that's my favorite.
Yeah, because Jamise kept trying to put more books in historical fiction. And I'd be like, okay, well, this one is also like Pachinko. It's also a family saga, so let's move it to there so you can fit something else in historical fiction. Yeah.
So we have two questions, and both of them are ones that I was curious about as well. So this is perfect. What was the hardest part of picking out the books? And I'm guessing the winnowing down into what you decided. And related to that question,
can't get away.
Is there going to be another one because you hated winnowing it down and you want to do more?
Hi, Courtney, and hi, Shatia.
I would say, I mean, I'm all for another one. You know, Jamise is still in recovery on how much work it was. So we have to sort of let her forget about it a little. And then I think, you know, we'll get her on board for another.
I think I'm still trying to wrap my mind around having a first book, right? So I would never say never to anything, but I think still it's just so surreal to me. I think the hardest part about picking out the books, you know, for me, I think I kind of had like, when we had the stacks already figured out the titles, you know, I just kind of said, okay, these are what I really would like in, like my non-negotiables. But then, you know, we bounced ideas off one another as like, oh, we're missing this, because we really wanted to make it inclusive, to make sure that, you know, that everyone was showing up in the stacks. After we got them in there, it was kind of, I was very hands off as far as, because I mean, Jane knows what she's doing as far as like positioning, illustrating the books. It was just kind of a matter of dwindling. I don't know how hard it was for you, Jane, but you know, we had some struggles. I know with historical fiction, I had a challenge for sure.
Yeah. And you know, we do things like we definitely wanted to make sure we featured so many different authors and not have too many books by one author, although there'll be an author, like I would put every N.K. Jemisin book in there I could fit, you know? So, I mean, and Jamise would fit in. It was just, we had to pick and choose on what was the most important one to fit into what section. And
oh, you'd have to say Jamise would put in all the women she can. Forget, I'm like, we have to have more men in here.
We did, yeah. We both read a lot of women writers, so we did have to work a little bit harder to make sure we got a lot of men, a lot of male authors in there too. That's for sure. Yeah.
Yes,
I love that flip flop of the norm. I'm here for that. That's great.
Yes.
Nicole has the question about whether there were any books you were especially excited to highlight, any standouts that didn't make it. And I am also curious what your favorites were.
Well, I would say, I mean, in terms of things that didn't make it, part of the problem was, you know, we had to, our cutoff date was March, basically. So that's when we couldn't fit any more books in. So every Tuesday now when new books come out, we're like, oh my gosh, that should be in there and that should be in there, you know. So that's part of the, I know that Jamise, you have a standout certainly from since March.
Oh, I mean, the love songs of W.E. Du Bois was my standout that I wish would have been in there. But she also asked, would you have any books that we were excited to highlight? And I would say I had a person and a book. So The Street by Ann Petrie was a book that I was really, really excited to highlight because it was the first book by a Black American woman that sold 1 million copies in 1946. So I was super excited to highlight that book. And then as far as an author, I was very excited to highlight Bernice McFadden. I've been a fan of hers for years. And I just thought she's one of those voices that people know about her, but she's just not as read widely as she should be. And she has such a beautiful catalog. And I wanted to make sure that I highlighted her in the book.
And for me, I definitely, as I mentioned, N.K. Jemisin, I read a lot of speculative fiction of various kinds. So also Helen Oyeyemi, I am a big fan of hers. So I was putting her books in wherever I could. And what else? Empire of Wild is a great book by Cherie Dimaline. It came out, we did get it in there, but it hasn't been out that long. And also The Vanished Birds by Simon Jimenez are both, you know, I like everything where reality is a little bit different than we can perceive it, I would say, in most of the books I like, but yeah.
And that's her thing. Like we had stacks that we kind of, when we were researching, it's like, okay, I'll take this, you take that. And so she had the cookbooks
Yeah, I love cooking.
Yeah, the cookbooks.
Jamise's boyfriend cooks all the meals for them. It's awesome.
I was like, you can have the cookbooks, but like the classics and poetry, historical fiction, you know, I kind of researched on those, but we
poetry. I am not really a poetry reader, so
Yeah.
thank goodness it was awesome that Jamise knew, you know, it was all over that. So
there's a question for you, one of your favorites.
Which writing room did you enjoy illustrating most? Great
that's
question.
an excellent question. I actually I really like Nick Stone's writing room. Hers is very fun and the colorful and just had a lot of like little, you know, like she writes a lot of middle grade fiction and young adult, but also has written some Black Panther comic book related things, like I think recently. And so she had a number of little figurines on her bookshelf that I could draw in addition to books I liked. And then also Molly Ye's kitchen. She is author of a cookbook and she's also on the Food Network. And so I thought her kitchen is, you know, where she develops her recipes. And I thought that would be perfect. And she has a lot of stuff in that kitchen, you know, like there's all just shelves full of different really cute pots and pans and books and everything else. So those I really enjoyed. Oh, and Rahman Alam's little writing desk. He has a really nice little art collection right above his desk. And I think he actually said they've moved or he doesn't have that desk anymore. So it was nice that I felt like, as with the old Bookmine storefront, it was nice to memorialize it for him and then give him the drawing after. So
I think it was funny when you said to me, you were watching CNN, you said, oh my God, I love Dr. Eddie Glaude's bookshelves. I was like, I know him, I can ask him.
I had posted about him on Instagram because I'm fascinated by everybody using Zoom.
I saw on your Instagram page.
Yeah, and I always look to see what they have highlighted, and his bookshelf, I posted it, I took a picture of the television because his bookshelf is the best. Like, not only is it full of books, but he like positions some and they change. Like I can tell he curates. Yes. He puts some face out depending on what he's thinking about at the time or what he wants to highlight. I don't know, but by far he is the best. So I was so excited when Jamise was like, "Oh, I know him. I can ask him." I'm like, "Yes, that is awesome."
And he was so happy to submit he's like, "My desk is a mess." I said, "No, don't change anything."
His desk was a mess. That is 100% correct. And there were, and he had books stacked on the floor as well as on the bookshelves. But it was great that he was cool with me drawing all of that. It was great.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So what else can we talk about?
So I'm curious whether working on this project, particularly for Jamise, as this is your first book, you never know what's going to come.
Yeah.
Whether it's changed your reading at all, both what you're reading and how you're reading.
Good question.
Oh, that's a great question. So I haven't had time to read, just so it hasn't changed my reading as far as what I'm reading, because I love nonfiction. And I think that's always going to be nonfiction and historical fiction are always going to be my favorites. But one thing it made me realize is that there are books out there that I still need to read. I found so many books that I haven't read. Like I haven't read any Joy Harjo books. And so that's on my list. I'm making a list like for 2022 of the things that I need to read. I promised Jane I'm going to read N.K. Jemisin. So I'm going to read that over the Christmas break. So yeah, it just kind of let me know that there are, while we're saying to people, diversify your shelf, I can still, although I read like widely, I can still add more diverse books to my read list.
Yeah. And I would think that goes for me, in terms of how it's changed mine, because Jamise reads a lot of nonfiction and a lot of history, and I don't usually. So, but because she talks so fondly of it, I read The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson, and it was awesome. Like it was great. So it's very nice to talk to someone so much about books and find other ones yourself. And if if they got included in, I know they're worth reading. So, yeah.
So, yeah. And then I think another thing that we are asked quite often, Jane, this is, they really like that we highlighted children's picture books.
Yeah, I very much, I mean, I am not a kid clearly, and I don't have any kids, but I still really enjoy kids books, particularly picture books. I mean, you know, illustration. I think they're just, I think the fact, obviously I have a fondness for illustration, for picture books for grownups as well. I feel like pictures are awesome. Why would we, you know, only let kids have them in their books? But I really enjoyed curating the stacks of books for the middle grade, the YA, and the picture book sections. And there's some really just spectacular books in there. And I feel like, especially middle grade to me is like, that's the time of in your life where you first are reading books on your own. And it's the first time I remember like hugging a book to my chest because I loved it so much.
Yes.
So those I feel like are ones that really stick with you. And especially obviously when you read them at that age. So I particularly enjoy researching those.
And that's one of the questions we received at a couple other events, is like if we would do one all dedicated to kids and children's books.
Yeah, which would be very fun. Yeah, totally.
So what, if I can ask, if you have an answer, what was that book that cemented your status as a bibliophile? That book that you hugged to your chest and was like, oh, this is who I am.
For me, I would say it was The Phantom Tollbooth by Norton Juster. I loved that book so much. Again, it was sort of like that there was more to reality than we could perceive. And also I was a kid who was always bored, you know, like always complaining that I was bored. And that book, I remember sort of realizing for the first time that I was bored by choice, that it was my fault if I was bored. I should figure out something else to do. And I would say I've probably never been bored since. I have way too many projects, more than I can handle. So yeah.
I literally, because, you know, I know that I love Judy Blume. That I just, you know, that was, I'm going to say blubber, but I really love Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. I mean, those were the books that kind of like were my thing growing up. But I always think another question that people ask, and I think it's interesting to hear, is how we started. So how did you start your platform? And then I'll share
Yeah.
how did you start the drawing and illustrating?
Yeah, well, so I used to do a lot of internet stuff, but I painted on the side, and I had a studio when I lived in New York. But the landlord sold the building, so I had I only was able to then paint in our own tiny apartment, my husband. So I was one day sitting at our dining room table with a blank sheet of paper, and like, I have no idea what to draw. It's just so different because I had been working on very large things before. And I was sitting next to our bookshelves, and I thought, well, I'll just draw books. I love books. They're, you know, I really like just how they look all together. I'll just draw some, and it'll make the paper not blank anymore, and maybe things will move from there. And then that day, a friend of my husband's happened to come over, and he was like, oh my gosh, what are those? I want to buy all 4 of those right now. And I was like, what? That doesn't, I mean, for me as an artist, that's not a thing that usually happens, that somebody reacts so viscerally to something that I've made so much that they just like really want to have it. So so I knew there was something there. And after that, for a little while, I started drawing friends' bookshelves like as they lay, like as if you go to a dinner party and you notice what's on people's shelves, or like in a Zoom, you know, trying to see what is on your shelves behind you. And that was fun. But then I eventually realized it would actually be much more interesting if I asked them, what are your favorites? What are the ones that made you who you are? You know, what are the ones you hug to your chest? And then I started drawing those, and that's how Ideal Bookshelf came to be. So yeah, that's how it started. Yeah. And you?
Oh, and for me, I came onto Bookstagram, and I think in 2015 with Spines and Vines, where I paired books and wine, just only because I was sharing what I loved to read and what I was drinking at the time. And in 2018 is when I created the hashtag Diverse Spines to highlight books by Black women and women of color. And I started the whole book community at the end of 2018. So that's kind of like how Diverse Spines came about. And it's funny because when we're talking about the book and we're getting ready to go on tour, when we met in New York, my sister calls me and she says, do you realize like you started a hashtag and it's a book? And I told her, I said, I know. I think it's so surreal. I don't even know, like, pinch me, is this still happening? But it's been a great process. You want to talk about how we pick the books on the cover?
Yeah. Several drinks
Your
and a lot of
face kind of
yeah.
went down like, oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the hardest part. I mean, you know,
You see?
obviously what we wanted to do was pick books. I think yours, pick books that are that we love, that we think are very important for people to read, but also books that stand out and look really good on a cover and will get your attention from far away. So it was quite a process. There was a lot of back and forth.
This was really hard.
You know, we wanted some poetry books on there, some kids books on there, obviously a lot of fiction, and yeah, that was hard. I would say.
But I think we bounced it off of one another, because I think when I was throwing books in and you were like, oh, we don't have any kids books, and I wasn't even thinking like kids book on the cover. So, you know, we have kids books on there. So it was a good process.
And then, I mean, and then to add to that, for instance, I often draw the first edition hardcover of a book spine, because usually they actually have more going on than the paperback, although that's not always true. And sometimes, like, I will even draw like Pachinko. I'm a big fan of Pachinko, but I think the spine of the US edition of the book is kind of boring. I think just the hardcover is just like off-white with gold type, I believe, and then the paperback is pale blue, and it has a nice little picture of the mom and the kids on it, but not a lot going on. So this is the UK edition, which I very much love. It's got sort of these embroidered flowers and birds on it, and so, you know, cheated a little and put a UK spine on there, even though most of the other ones are US. But yeah, I generally will pick whatever I think looks best when drawing something.
So do you get mad at bad covers, Jane? Because I do, and I'm not an artist.
I get mad at bad covers, and I get mad at boring spines. I mean, I know ideally every book would be facing out, but that's just not how it is, you know? I mean, in a bookstore, you can't fit every book on the shelf facing out. So the spine has to be interesting too, but some people still make these terribly boring spines. Yeah.
We actually have at our front counter, we had all of this, because we're also a used bookstore. So we have all of this used hardcover fiction that does not fit on normal fiction shelves, which we built. And so we shoved them all, like, you know, pancaked like that in front of the wood of our front counter. And on one very slow rainy day, two of the booksellers rainbow ties it.
Nice.
So it's in rainbow order, which is very pretty. But I cannot tell you the bone I have to pick with cover designers who make the spine a different color from the front of the cover. Because we're like, oh, of course, it's red.
Yeah.
Like, but the spine isn't red, so you can't find the dang thing. It's so frustrating.
And it's very common for some reason. I have noticed that, because I will be looking at the book and I'm like, wait, this is the same edition? It's totally different. Yeah, totally.
That's pretty funny. I love that. There are some, okay, so Shantia has a question. Is there one book you wish would have been included on the cover that you didn't get a chance to?
Well, you would definitely put Love Songs of W.B. Du Bois, but it's such a thick book, it would have taken up, you know, 3 other books. So I would have said, no, sorry, that one is too fat. Yeah.
I think, I don't know. I think that I got everything. I think everything's on there. I don't really have one, I don't think. Maybe Black Book, but no, it had a black spine. No, I think we worked through that so much. I don't think there's anyone that I wish that would have been on the cover.
Yeah, we did have Black Book on there, but it was hard to tell because the background cover is black and it was black. You couldn't really see where the end of it
was on there. Flipping through to see.
Yeah.
No, I think that I'm really satisfied with the cover, because that's something we worked on. It had to be well over a week on working on figuring out what we wanted to take out.
That's a good question for you, Jamise.
Oh, are there particular books you would recommend to young Black women so they can see themselves positively represented in a book? Wow, that's a
Thank you, Catherine. That's a great question.
That's a great question. And I'm gonna have to get back to Catherine. She's gonna have to DM me, because I'm thinking when you're talking about positively,
She adds about 12 years old is the reader, I'm guessing.
12 years old.
oh,
That's
12 years old. Okay, I was gonna say, oh my goodness. I still gonna have to get back 12 years old.
I would say that's.
You have one, Jane? I don't
I'm
really.
thinking. A Good Kind of Trouble is great.
Yeah.
Middle grade. What is her name?
This is My America's Not. I mean, that's kind of deep, so that's gonna be too much. I love that book. It's a YA book.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic book. But it's probably a little bit.
12-year-olds. I feel like 12-year-olds are almost adults these days. I think they would.
This is My America is probably one of my favorites that I've read this recently.
I'm looking at, so we have a list of anti-racist YA and middle grade books on our website. And I'm looking through it right now and seeing a couple. From the Desk of Zoe Washington is a cute one.
Yep.
Brown Girl Dreaming. I mean, Jacqueline Woodson.
Oh my God, yeah, that's a great one. And Chlorine Sky is too as well.
Chlorine Sky, yeah, and I would say You Should See Me in a Crown. I loved. I mean, it's a little bit romance, but it's the main character is awesome. I think that would be great.
And I just read Instructions for Dancing, Nicola Yoon.
Yeah,
that would be very, very good.
Yeah.
So those are some.
Great. I put the link to that list in there if anybody wants to take a look.
Yes, Courtney, Nick Stone, anything by Nick Stone. Yeah.
So was it weird meeting in person after a digital relationship for so long?
Yes, but it's called a digital relationship.
It wasn't weird. It was sort of like, it felt totally normal. And I could see a car pulling up and I was like, is that her? Is that their Uber? You know, because we were.
And I could see her and my boyfriend could, are you going to let the car stop? Or are you just going to jump out while he's still driving? Because I had like the door open, leg out. And he was like, okay, she's not going anywhere.
No, but it was so good. He took the best picture of when we first met and hugged. It was really just such a great feeling to finally meet the person we had done this whole giant project with. It was really awesome. Yeah. It
was. And then we had a great time.
Yeah.
Celebrating. We did.
Celebrating a little too much, yeah.
A little bit too much. Too many margaritas, but we had a good time.
There's no such thing as too many margaritas. Just not enough water.
Yeah, right.
Not enough water. Exactly.
Great question. How did the concept of including bookish people recommends come about?
Well, first we knew we wanted to ask some of our favorite authors to pick a book that they would recommend. And then when we were doing that, we're like, yeah, okay, but we really should ask bookstagrammers because Jamise is a bookstagrammer. And obviously, I mean, bookstagrammers read more and talk about books more and review books more than, and they put so much energy into it without often getting paid anything for it. It's really amazing how much work goes in. So clearly they would be experts in choosing a book in this. And so, yeah, we reached out to a whole bunch.
And they were super excited to kind of, give their recommendation. Like someone asks you for a book recommendation that's going to be in a book. And then for you to write like a small shelf talker about that book, they were so thrilled to do it. So yeah, it was really cool to highlight them.
I mean, the whole overall sort of our idea for the book was almost as if, it was during the pandemic, most bookstores were closed, or at least for a good part of it. And, I think all of us missed that. And I think what we wanted to do was sort of make a book that was like being able to carry your favorite independent bookstore around in your pocket, so that there's full of shelf talkers from all kinds of people who you might meet in a bookstore. I think one of the things, I'm sure, Elena, you would agree with this, I would think, that one thing bookstores bring is not just an access to books, but also a sense of community and a sense of connecting with other people who are interested in the same things you are. And I think that's one thing we were trying to get across, and asking other, book lovers to pick a book, I think really goes a long way in doing that.
And also, I think a lot of people, I think about the timing, like when we talk, the timing of the book, it was summer 2020. So you had all this racial reckoning going on. There were so many, in the middle of a pandemic, there was this whole push to highlight bookstores that were owned by people of color, and highlight them, because people know the names of like the big bookstores and, you know, helping them stay afloat. So all that was going on, and we were writing this book. And so it was important to include the bookstores as well. You know, Jane did beautiful drawings of bookstores to help people, you know, see the different bookstores that are out there. But one thing that I will say, in our first event, someone asked me, you know, how do we feel about bringing all these stories to light? And I was like, oh no, that's not, I mean, these stories have always been here, always. It's just a matter of who has access to them, putting them in a place where there's a compilation where you can easily find them and see that they're there, but they've always been there. So this is our small offering to just show you there's so many books. And I always say, you're not well read if you're only, you know, if you're not reading diverse, you're not well read. There's lots of stories out there. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more with that. I am curious, you know, what you mentioned, these bookstores that you highlighted and how many of them were closed for a lot of this time. So how did you pick the bookstores? Did you get to visit them? And Jane, how do you draw a bookstore if you have not been there?
Definitely a bunch of them we have been to, either one or the other of us has been to in the past. Jamise tried to put every bookstore in the DC metro area in there, and I was like, no, we need to have some from other parts of the country too.
We have a lot of diverse bookstores here, but we got the majority of the ones that I wanted in. But I think too, Jane, there were a lot on the East Coast, so we had to make sure that we had the Midwest and West Coast, because there were a lot on the East Coast.
Yeah, and a couple from Canada too.
Yeah.
I mean, again, like I said, we could do a whole book just on bookstores. I mean, there are so many more that are not in there, and with Bibliophile, I mean, too, there was just so many bookstores in general that are really awesome. And every, you know, so what I do is, if I've been there and taken pictures myself, great, but often that's not the case. So I just research online and find all different pictures people have taken when visiting there, or the store takes themselves. And there's just so many really cute bookstores. I mean, places that you just would love to visit. So I take a whole bunch of drawings and just sort of figure out what the space must be like based on that, and then make one drawing that tries to fit in really the essence of the bookstore. Sometimes, you know, I'll put two parts of it together that aren't necessarily right together in real life, but I'm trying to get that feeling for how it feels compared to other stores.
Elena, you mentioned that, you know, Jane drew your store, that, you know, it's not there, it's not that way anymore.
It was a very cute storefront.
Two bookstores in our book, they both now like went from renting their space to now they own their space. And so they've moved. So they both are like really happy that they have like where they originally started from in the book. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we even have the windows, because they replaced the windows. So the frames, the orange frames, they just pulled them out, and they're literally both just sitting in our back room.
Oh, that's awesome.
Because we can't bear to like 100% part with them, even though the building's kind of a piece of crap. So it's like falling down. It's like not a good building, and like those windows leaked a little bit. But yeah, it's cool to have it memorialized that way. It's, I mean, and I think we were maybe 3 or 4 years old when my Chronicle sales rep sends me an email and says, so you can't tell anyone, but your bookstore is in this book. And I was like, no. Like, no, of course not. Why would tiny little Napa Bookmine be in anybody's book? And there it was very thrilling. And I can only imagine the same thrill that all of these other bookstores that you featured in this book having this, you know, it's there for all time. I mean, we have, you know, our copy that we're never going to get rid of. And I hope that they all have one too, that they're just going to keep with them no matter how many iterations of their store there are, because it's really special. So thank you.
Of course. I mean, so I used to live near you, and I was at your store. So I definitely have, I mean, I was very fond of it. And I just thought it looked awesome, that the building and the way it is, it really had a great feel to it. But I know that Joanna, the owner of
I
Belcanto
was going to
Books,
mention her.
yeah, in Long Beach, she will sign copies of the book on the Belcanto drawing page too, if you order a book from one of our books from Belcanto, which I think is awesome. I'm like, I want to go around and collect autographs from all the store owners, you know.
And I don't know why we didn't do that. Some of
I
the
don't
stores
know.
we went
We
to
were
on
too-
It's like the
tour
best
Too many
yearbook
margaritas.
ever.
Right.
And you can expense that, right?
Yeah.
Like that's
Right.
a business
I
expense.
feel like, sure.
Sure.
Send it myself. Yeah, exactly.
I did love Nicole's comment, who is also an indie bookseller. Hi, Nicole, indie bookseller, yay! And loves the book, and it's great to add new titles to the shelves, which is so true. I mean, anytime that booksellers can get our hands on somebody else doing the work for us of compiling fantastic lists of fantastic books, we're all just thrilled.
Awesome. Good. Glad to be
And
of
for our
service.
reading too. So I'm curious, Jamise, what else have you been involved with Diverse Spines? What else does your book community do? I want to know. I want to be a part of it. I think a lot of people do.
I mean, we're on Instagram, and basically we host a book a month, and then we chat with the author at the end of the month. But the one thing that I do, I encourage people to tag us in their photos and use the hashtag. And then I just basically highlight what they're reading. And I think one of my favorite things is, like, starting from 2018 to now, if you just hit the hashtag, it gives you such a resource of diverse books. I mean, I love it so much because it's been tagged over, what, 50,000 times. That's a lot. And if I tell someone, just hit the hashtag, you can find any book. You know, people tag the men books by men in it. That's fine. That's okay. But that's fine. I don't care anymore. But, you know, the platform is generally highlighting women. And we've had, you know, Susan Abuala was on live with us. So this year we've had a lot of authors, you know, speak with us, but that's basically the community.
But I mean, Jamise also hosts most weeks a literary wine down where she drinks wine and talks to an author, and they're awesome. Like, I highly recommend attending those because
that's on Spines and Vines. So yeah, I'm on live on both platforms.
Yeah.
But
I know, but I mean, in terms of what else do you do related to books?
I do the one. I have one tomorrow.
The way you talk to people, it always seems like you've known them for years, and turns out you just met them right then. And it's just great how comfortable they feel talking to you and telling you stuff. It's great.
Someone asked who's been Shantia. Is that how you say it? I get it wrong.
And feel free, if anybody wants to pop on camera and ask in person, that's totally fine. Yeah. We'd love to hear your voice and see your face, but you don't have to.
Favorite author to speak with. Okay. I'm going to say, that's hard because I've enjoyed every single person, but I'll have to say, on my birthday, not this past year, but last year, when Literary Wind Down was really new, Tayari Jones came on it was actually my actual birthday, and she had champagne and we talked. So that was a lot of fun. Elizabeth Acevedo was another great one. They're all on Spines and Vines if you go into the Instagram Live. But this year, it happened on the insurrection. I couldn't believe it was on the same day. I got to talk to Eddie Glaude, and Dr. Eddie Glaude. And so that probably was my favorite conversation from this year. We talked about his book, Begin Again. And that was an amazing conversation because we couldn't believe, this is going on here in DC, and now we're having this conversation. Lessons learned, James Baldwin, I think that's what it is. I can't remember the title, Begin Again. So yes, that was really, definitely.
I'm curious. So indie bookstore is something that when indie bookstores start out, getting events rolling is one of the hardest things to do. How was that for you? You know, you're not associated with the bookstore, you're doing this Bookstagram thing. Did you really struggle for a while to get things, or were people on board immediately? How has the growth process been for you?
Meaning, as it relates to
getting
authors to come and chat with you and that sort of thing.
You talked about one time because during the pandemic, people weren't able to do book tours.
so that's how, like, really for literary wind down, it was June. And here's the thing, my kids kept saying, you need to get on Instagram Live. That's the thing, Mom. I'm like, no, I'm not getting on this. No, you got to get on. And so once the world kind of shut down, I knew there was a book called Save a Ruby King. And I knew it was coming out, and all of her events were canceled. And I had been communicating with her, just on the side about her book. And I said, hey, I want to go on live. Would you want to go on live with me? Because I know you don't have any events for Pub Day. And she said, sure. And that's how that started. But typically, after that first event, I just basically asked people that I had a relationship with, be it because they've come to DC and I've been to their events, or we've just kept in touch from BookCon, seeing people at BookCon and just developing a relationship, which is why it made it easy to kind of reach out to a lot of people and say, hey, you want to give us a recommendation for your book? It was kind of like a no-brainer. It was easy. It really was, just to tell them what the book about. Everyone knew who Jane was. They knew she was going to draw something fabulous. And so we sent emails out to everyone.
True. When I was working on Bibliophile, it was definitely, I was asking people and would definitely hear crickets back a lot of the time. So I guess it was great this time where people were just like, oh yeah, totally. I don't think anyone said no, really, one or two. Yeah.
No.
So Jane, are you working on anything, any book thing, any new book coming out?
I am working on a picture book for kids this time, actually. Yep. I've been working on it a little bit. It has been a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. I have a whole new appreciation for people who write and illustrate kids books, because it's just something I haven't done before. So, and I know it seems like I do illustrations or whatever all the time, but illustrating a whole narrative story with, a story arc and everything to it is very different than sort of nonfiction illustration, which is what I've been doing with Bibliophile. So it's getting there.
I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, yeah, me too.
Elena, someone asked early on, like, about the books that we weren't able to get in, or that Jane didn't get to draw. So one way that we were able to get books in was with the Read Around the World. That was, I think, 67 different books. And we wanted to make sure that the author had a connection to the country, be it that they were born there, parents from there. And so that's one way we were able to get a lot more people into the book. Yeah. If they weren't mentioned in the stack somewhere else. And we tried not to get people that were already mentioned.
We tried hard not to, double and triple up on anyone and really spread it out. But it was, yeah.
If anybody wants to pop on and say hi in person, feel free to do so. Yay! Hi.
Hi, everybody. I have my camera off. My daughter is here with me and she's watching TV.
Hi.
But this has been such a joy. I follow you, Miss Jamise, on social media. Like I love, your wind downs. I think it's amazing. When I saw that this was coming out, I was like, I have to order it. And Amazon took forever to get it to me, but it finally came. I'm so excited.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad you.
I'm actually going to go to the Napa Bookmine probably this weekend and get me a signed copy as well.
Excellent.
Well, I will be in Napa actually next week, so I can come by and personalize books for people too, if we want.
That's awesome.
Unfortunately, Jamise will not be there, sadly.
No, I won't.
If you do want that to happen, I'm putting my email in the chat. Just shoot me an email and we can make sure that we get a personalized copy for you.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
Because we do have a bunch on hand. We can make it happen.
Oh.
Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Yeah, what a treat.
I'm going to turn my camera back off.
Okay. Jane, you think we should close out and talk about the where to start stack? And my favorite is our favorite books. So this is my grand pup. My son's dog.
And this was my cat. He passed away last year. And so we put them on top of our favorites on each of us have a little stack of favorites in there.
And this
then-
was funny because Jane says to me, she sends me a message like, gosh, like you read nothing but nonfiction and history books. Like, yeah. Where to start?
Together we cover a lot.
Yeah, we cover everything together. Yes.
And then, yeah, one thing, so we realized as we were making this, like, we're like, okay, well, here's a great resource to start reading more diversity, but it's a lot. I mean, even in this, you know, it's not that big a book, but it gets a lot of stuff in there. So we thought, well, we should also make a little stack, you know, of books where to start, like what you should start with. And so, yeah, then it didn't end up being so little, but it was so hard to take, you know, to not put even more in. But I think it's a great place to sort of get you started. You can always just close your eyes and point at one of the books and start there, if nothing else. And then I think we have a reader's journal coming out that'll match this book, and it'll actually have a checklist in it, so you could really just go through this stack and read every book in there if you wanted to. So that should be out late this month, I think. It was supposed to come out already, but supply chain. So yeah.
Yeah. And the note cards are coming out right after that. So there'll be
Yeah.
like 3 offerings that you could have.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Still in time for Christmas, although, you know, hopefully everything gets where it's supposed to go in
Hopefully.
time. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank
thank
you,
you.
everyone.
Oh, nice.
I'll just read Catherine's comment, so it's in the video as well. Thank you, Jamise and Jane, for creating this wonderful, beautiful resource. I can't wait to share this book with friends and family and everyone else. I work in a public library. We love
Awesome.
librarians.
Yeah,
love
we love
libraries.
it. Thank you.
Well, thank you all so much for joining us this evening. Thank you, Jamise, for staying up late.
No problem.
We're way past your bedtime. We really appreciate it. Thank you, Jane, for joining us from
Yeah.
Hawaii.
Thank you for having us.
Yes.
This has been a real treat, and what an incredible resource and a beautiful art object you two have created. And it's just really wonderful. So we're so thrilled for you. We're thrilled for us. We're thrilled for readers. It's just all great. So thank you so much. And again, if you do want a personalized copy, shoot me an email, elena@napabookmine.com or read@napabookmine.com, and Jane and I will make it happen.
Definitely.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Have a great night.
Yeah,
Thanks,
have a good night.
Courtney.